We're doing a talk today about Ryzen, featuring me drinking this beer. What happened with Ryzen, you say? Well, stay tuned. By the way, ignore the Rogue glass. This is not a Rogue beer, but this is a stout glass. It's the proper one for this beer, since this beer is a Imperial barrel-aged beer and it's 12%. It's delicious and chocolatey. Welcome everybody to another little technology talk. So yesterday, the embargo lifted on the AMD Ryzen 5s. Now this is the 6-core 12-thread and the 4-core 8-thread models that are coming out from AMD. They had announced the pricing, they announced the TDP, they announced the accessories, they announced all of that. So let me go ahead and just kind of give you a real quick rundown. You got your Ryzen 5 1600X, which is 95 watts. That's the 6-core 12-thread. That's that bad boy. Base clock of 3.6, a boost of 4. The XFR will give it only 100 megahertz. It's 95 watts, does not include a cooler, and it's priced at $250. Okay. Then you've got your Ryzen 5 1600. That's also a 6-core 12-thread. 3.2 base, 3.6 boost. You're looking at 100 megahertz XFR, 16 meg cache, 65 watt TDP. That is priced at $219 and comes with the Spire. Now it is not RGB. These Ryzen 5s are only coming with the black coolers, so it's just something to keep in mind. Then you got your Ryzen 5 1500X. Now this is the one that I think is really interesting, and this is the one I'm actually going to talk probably the most about in this video. It's a 4-core 8-thread, 3.5 base, 3.7 boost, 200 megahertz XFR, which XFR to me, it's kind of a joke at this point. I don't care what side of the fence you sit on, XFR is really, it's a really great idea, but it's just not working very well. This is only a 65 watt TDP, same as the 1600, not 1600X, I forgot to mention that. And this one also comes with the Spire, and it's priced at $189. So for $190, you could potentially be getting a processor that a few years ago from Intel was a $350 processor. That's really interesting. The Ryzen 5 1400 4-core 8-thread, 3.2 gigahertz base, 3.4 gigahertz boost, 50 megahertz increments on the XFR, 8 meg cache, whereas all the other ones are 16. 65 watt TDP, comes with the stealth cooler, and is $169 United States. Okay, so let's talk about this, right? So what's the deal with these processors? Where do they fit in the grand scheme of things? Well, I think it's a very good jumping off point for AMD to come out with a very good performance per dollar CPU, especially with the 1500X. That one I'm really interested in because there's a few things you need to know about CPUs and things like that. So the more cores you have, you're going to have task scheduler and things like that bounce the workload between the cores. And they've proven that Windows Task Scheduler is working fine with the Ryzen 7s. So you're having these latency issues in certain applications that really, it's kind of a problem. But if you want a multi-purpose CPU, then who cares? The latency is not that big a deal. And really, the Ryzen 7s are about as bad at gaming as a 7700K is at encoding video. So really, saying a Ryzen 7's bad at gaming is a joke. And these Ryzen 5s shouldn't have the two multi-core stacks in the CPU die to where it has to negotiate the workload between the two. That shouldn't be an issue with these because it's only a 4-core and an 8-thread on the 1500X. That's the one we're talking about. A 3.5 base, 3.7 boost is kind of old school. That's where the 2700K from Intel sat when that came out. That was years ago. But when it came out, it wasn't $189. So you're talking about performance for an older Intel, which is actually what I have in my computer back here, is a 2700K at 4.8 gigahertz right now on water. You're talking a processor that I've gotten years of use out of for only $189. That's a bargain in anybody's book. Truthfully, that's a bargain. So you'll also notice if you start getting into the nitty gritty and you're comparing, Intel's lineup to the Ryzen lineup, okay? You're gonna notice that the Ryzen CPUs have a higher L3 cache, larger cache size. That's really not that important because the way the architecture works is you have 3 caches, your L1, L2, L3, all different levels. When the CPU needs instructions, it automatically goes to L1 cache, which is the smallest, but it's the fastest, so commonly used instructions are stored there. Your L2 cache is where the CPU looks for instruction if it's not found in cache 1, so it bumps up to cache 2. It's a little bit slower, but a little bit bigger, and that just goes down the line to L3. So when you're looking at a 6 meg cache on the Kaby Lake stuff or Skylake stuff versus 16 megs on the Ryzen stuff, really, I mean, it's not going to make any difference, truthfully, that you're ever going to notice. It's just a number to say, well, this car's got 1200 bhp and this one's got 1400 bhp. But the one that's 1200 weighs less. It's kind of the same argument. So really, doesn't really matter. Where I think this is really important to remember is that these Ryzen processors are budget oriented, but if they punch above the accepted price point for performance, where, you know, when you're going to look at the Intel stuff, to get something that competes with the 1500X, it's going to be a 4-core i5 with no hyperthreading. Truthfully, why not go with the hyper-threaded, the multi-threaded Ryzen 1500X? So I'm waiting to see some benchmarks on this, but thus far, this looks really interesting to see. This thing will be better than an i5, you know, truthfully, it will be better than an i5 because you have the multi-threads in. So here's something to remember about the included coolers with these Ryzen 5s and even the Ryzen 7s. They're both 65 watt TDP coolers. So now I'm sure some of you just went like, no, they're not. No, the Spire is a 95 watt, you're wrong. No, the Spire is actually 65 watt TDP for higher ambient temperatures. So you could liken it to being a 95 watt TDP design cooler, but it is not. It's a very important distinction to make. My opinion with anything, ditch the stock cooler. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter how great it sounds. Leave it in the box, so if you want to sell it, you can include the cooler later. That's a better way to do things. When you're talking about these coolers, they're the bare minimum for these CPUs. You know, I know what you're saying. Oh, well, everything except the 1600X is 65 watts TDP. Why does that matter? You know, you want a little bit more headroom. You want more cooling. You want more performance, right? You want more longevity out of your CPU. It needs better cooling. Now, these coolers don't underperform by any measure, but look at the longevity of it. Like I said, this 2700K behind me here has been running overclocked hard since the day I got it, and it's still running just fine. I've got no issues with it. It's been through several CPU or GPU upgrades and several other component upgrades, and it's still trucking right along. Where do these Ryzens really fit in? And that's the important question that we really need to be asking ourselves as a community of gamers and you know, PC enthusiasts. Made you wait for that one. These Ryzen CPUs fit in a very, very important area that I think's been missing in the PC enthusiast and gaming world, is that you don't have a good performance per dollar option when you start getting into something that's more enthusiast grade and not just like, you know, a pre-built machine that you're going to throw a graphics card in, right? Like a lot of people do that. I never advise that. Build it, go on Reddit, build a PC. People will help you. You know, we're not all assholes. Truthfully, I don't recommend that, but this is a good price point because now you can build something that is akin to a $1,200, you know, custom built computer, you know, 5 years ago that still is very good, or even better now because you have improvements in the technology and the way it handles PCI lanes and memory and all that other stuff. So you're actually going to be getting a much better machine now for a lot less money. So these fit in a very important place to be a very good performance per dollar option that can compete with, you know, generation or 2-generation old i7 for a fraction of the price. People who are looking at the really high-end Intel, you know, 8-core beasts, 6950s, they're maybe not necessarily going to want to save the money because it doesn't mean quite as much for for them as it does to the average Joe, because a lot of these people, $1,000 to them for a business expense is a drop in the bucket. I've built CAD machines and things like that for people where, you know, they're like, oh, here's a $5,000 budget, build me a machine. Okay, you're going to get something that's creme de la creme. And even if you tell them, a lot of times I've told clients of mine, hey, I could build you something for way less than that that's going to do the same type of stuff. Your budget's bloated. No, it's fine. Just keep the money for you. Which now you could make a little bit more money as a builder. Just saying, if you're dishonest. But you know, to some of these people, it's a business expense and they want something that's tried and true because downtime is loss of money. So I'm not saying that the Ryzens are bad or that there's downtime involved with them or anything like that, but by the time the next generation Ryzen comes out, these bugs will be worked out, the BIOS stuff will be resolved, all these little problems that people are seeing and making a big freaking deal about that really aren't that big of a deal, they're all going to be worked out. So don't sweat the small stuff. These look like a very promising deal at $190 for that 1500X. That's pretty hot. Build something out of that. Make a small little LAN box, water cool it. I don't know. Stay tuned because I'll probably be doing that. So, cheers guys. If you like this video, go ahead and leave a comment, like, subscribe, and don't buy into the hate or hype train. Just stay neutral and make a decision for yourself on these CPUs, because they are a very good option for not a whole lot of money. So stay tuned. I'll see you guys around. Have a great night.